Join lifelong Star Wars fans Lauren and Steph as they dive into the world of Star Wars fan fiction, discussing a new fic each month, breaking down the writing style, characters, canon relationship, and more. This is your source for Star Wars fan fiction recommendations. So come on and find out why it's one hell of a fanfic. Hey y'all, and welcome back to One Hell of a Fanfic, where me, Stephanie, and Lauren talk to you about a new fan fiction every month. We're longtime Star Wars fans and relatively new fan fiction readers, and we're going to bring you along on our little journey. How are you today, Lauren?
I'm good. And you know what? It's crazy because we're relatively new to fanfic, but we've been doing this podcast for almost a year, which is crazy.
Yeah.
But we've been learning a lot over the past year, because I know before we started this, I hadn't read very much Star Wars fanfic at all. So it's kind of crazy to think about how almost a whole year has gone by.
It has. Every time we put up a new number of this one being episode 11, I'm like, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. Time's flying.
So this time we read Hollow by JennMel, which was a super quick fanfic to read. It was only like a little 5,500-ish words. And I finished it in probably 45 minutes, though I did take a nap halfway through.
Take a little break.
Yeah, it was just a small break. I was laying down and I was like, man, I could just take it. And I did. How long did it take you?
It took me probably the same as you, like 30 minutes or less, maybe. I just read it all the way through, but it was a really quick read, and I think it helped because a lot of this fanfic, it's broken down into pretty short segments, and whenever something's broken down like that I feel like just always pulls me through the story really quickly, so it was easy to read in one sitting.
Yeah, it does kind of re-engage you. And our favorite part of things to talk about was spice level, and this one had none. It was a level 0. This was not a romance at all, which was just fine because we've done romances lately.
Yeah. You got to change it up.
Canon relation. This one originally last month when we were talking about it, we thought it was going to be completely canon compliant. And I was super excited about that. But surprise to us, it was not. It was canon divergent. It started off very canon and then just kind of split off in the best kind of way, which brings me to tropes. Which tropes, speaking of the things that we're learning the last year, tropes and the names of them is the big thing I'm learning because I never know. But this one is called a fix fic, which is great because I was not expecting it to like kind of fix the things that we all kind of are sad about.
Yeah, you gotta love a fix fic. Gets you thinking about like what could have happened if the sad thing didn't happen, which we'll get to here in a minute.
And the author wrote it just because they didn't like that there was this like gap in reasoning while watching the Phantom Menace. Like, why did that thing happen? So they just wrote a story to make it work. So speaking of, what is the fan fiction about?
Well, first I will read our author summary off just to give you a little indication of what the author included in their note. And then after that, I'll give a more expanded summary once we start talking spoilers. But so for the author summary, they wrote, Obi-Wan has always had a secret, and Qui-Gon could not, must not ever know. If he did, then they would never even make it to Tatooine, let alone deal with the rest to come. One perfect possible future. That's all Obi-Wan needed to achieve. That's all. And so before I get into the more expanded summary with the spoilers and all that, I do want to ask you first, why do you recommend that people read this fic?
Well, now knowing it's a fix fic, that would be the reason. I like all the warm and fuzzies that come with, man, that just fixed it. Or that one little instance that happened that you're just like, why did that happen? And it helps you heal your heart a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I would add on to that too, is this fic, it does present a kind of interesting alternative to sort of explain something that we see in canon. In this fic, Obi-Wan does have a certain type of ability that he does not have in canon that we know of. But thinking about him having this ability, it does kind of it causes you to interpret things in a little bit of a different way. So I think that's kind of a cool thing that this fanfic is bringing to the table. Okay, should I say my expanded summary now?
Absolutely. Let's break into
Okay.
spoilers.
Yeah, so warning for spoilers. If you're planning on reading this fanfic on your own and you don't want to know what happens, now is your warning. So, for the full summary, so Obi-Wan has Force visions in this story, and his Force visions abilities are extensive. He has them all the time. They are detailed, and he pretty much is just completely burdened with knowing the full scope of everything that's going to happen. He knows that the temple's going to burn. He knows that he's going to have to face Maul. He knows like all these horrible things, and he's just a Padawan at this time. So he's a teenager, and he's having to deal with the knowledge of everything that we're going to see happen down the road. And the only people that he can tell about this are his three best friends who are also Padawans, but he doesn't feel empowered enough to tell Qui-Gon about it or any of the other masters, even though people do kind of encourage him. Like his three friends do kind of sometimes will be like, why are you not telling anyone? He doesn't want to because he feels like it's kind of just the impression that I got is he just felt like it was just too much of a can of worms to open to bring to a master. So he's trying to just handle it himself. Well, eventually, after Qui-Gon and him face Maul, and this is where the fix-it comes in because Qui-Gon lives through this encounter. After him and Qui-Gon face Maul, which Obi-Wan had been preparing for a long time because he knew that he was going to have to do it. But after Qui-Gon survives, he finally decides to tell Qui-Gon about the visions. And thankfully, Qui-Gon is supportive of it and kind of relieved in a way to know sort of the full scope of what Obi-Wan is dealing with so that way he can support him better. And so they end up the note that this fic ends on, it feels like they're going to work together to try to help Obi-Wan deal with this. So yeah, that's the story.
That was about it. I mean,
Yeah.
but also there's so much packed into this, going back to what you said before about how it's little snapshots of throughout time, that it was that author was able to give us so much of the story and Obi-Wan's past and the way he grew up and the little details that you weren't expecting to get, like a secret hideout that him and his friends had together.
Yeah, and we do go back and forth in time a lot in this one. So that is one thing to kind of be aware of. If flashbacks aren't really your thing, there's a lot of flashbacks in this fanfic where it does kind of, we're jumping around because it's kind of showing us like the scene that's happening in the present time, and then right after that it'll show us a flashback that's kind of related to that, or it'll show us a flashback and then it'll show us the present scene that's related to it. So it's going back and forth because it's like the past and the present is very much connected and sort of like one sort of unit in this story. So it's a really cool way of telling the story, but I know some people aren't a huge fan of flashbacks, which I totally get. So it's just one thing to be aware of if you're thinking about checking this one out.
It's also interesting how the author brings up in the fic itself that in Obi-Wan's head, the past and the future are just kind of all and the present are all kind of mingled together. And just that's how it was written also.
Totally. Yeah. Like you really get that sense as you're reading it because there were a couple moments where I was like, okay, wait, when is this happening? Because just because we're jumping around so much, but it felt intentional on the author's part because it's like you said, Obi-Wan is trying to live all of these lifetimes at the same time, which seems like that would be really confusing. So, but did you find the ending satisfying at the end of this?
I did. I liked how it kind of just brought it all together, and Qui-Gon knows, and then they have that like the most of the story follows Obi-Wan, and then at the very end it is Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan's friend Bant. It was Bant. Talking, and then you just kind of get his perspective, and it kind of lets you know that the end of everything's going to go well, and like you said before, they're going to move forward and help Obi-Wan find this, but it's filled with such hope and care, and they talk about love, and it's cute and satisfying.
Yeah, it definitely ends on that note of hope, which I feel like is so important for Star Wars storytelling. Like ending with a, a hopeful sort of tone at the end, really, that's something that kind of I almost need from a Star Wars story, is some sort of feeling of hope in some sort of way. It doesn't have to be like a huge feeling of hope, but there's got to be at least a glimmer of it there. And this one definitely had that. I also liked that it ended with Qui-Gon being supportive and Obi-Wan's reservations for not telling anyone about the visions. It ended up being that he does have the support that he's going to need to get through that. So I appreciated that, because one thing that this story does too is you really see the burden that this has put on Obi-Wan's life. So I liked that it ended with us knowing that he's not going to have to carry that burden alone anymore. He's going to have the guidance of someone who's stronger than him, more experienced than him, who's going to be able to help him figure all that out.
And the author waited till the end also, even mentioning that prior to that point, if Qui-Gon had told anybody else, it would have messed up the infinite amount of futures that there could have been.
Yeah. And that's like a whole nother thing, is the fact that not only can Obi-Wan, not only does he get visions, but he can see multiple outcomes of the same thing. Like, he can see different outcomes, like, okay, if I do this, then this is what's going to happen. If I do this, then this is what's going to happen. So that adds just like a whole nother messed up aspect to it. It's not just, a single vision that he gets like we see Anakin have in the movies. It's like he sees everything. It's pretty crazy.
So do you feel like this was a realistic, canon compliant kind of version of Obi-Wan?
I do think if we were to go with Obi-Wan having visions of this sort of nature, then yes, because I feel like the way that he was dealing with this and the way he's like trying to address it on his own felt very Obi-Wan to me, because he's like obsessively trying to prepare for every possible outcome, and he's trying to avoid the bad ones, push more towards the good ones. And he just really is like striving for perfection here, even though perfection isn't really ever possible for anybody, which I feel like in canon Obi-Wan, it's a very similar deal. It's just, in canon, we never know about how much of the future he can see. I don't think that's really ever explored. But if he did see the future like this, I definitely feel like this is how canon Obi-Wan would have dealt with it.
I absolutely agree with you on that. All of the characters actually seemed really on par with their canon counterparts. Qui-Gon had that same kind of rebellious being he is, also explained him as stubborn, and Obi-Wan helping to like guide him, but the way he guided him was just so funny.
The reverse psychology.
Yes. And then Anakin was just this little kid who was exactly what you'd expect a little kid to be. And even down to Windu, when he showed up a little bit, being this grouchy, grumpy, yelling sort of person. Like the author did a great job keeping everyone canon compliant in that way.
Yeah, I agree. It didn't feel like I really had to make any sort of leap with any of these characters with accepting who the character was. It just felt like a very seamless sort of transition in this case.
Were those characters that were the Padawans, were they made up? Were they original characters?
I thought that they were original characters. That was my interpretation, unless I don't know if maybe they were like, I know sometimes in fanfic people will use like if there was like a cameo of somebody like in the background, they'll like make a character based on that. But to my knowledge, in this one, the three best friends were completely original characters.
Yeah, I hadn't heard their names before, but I apparently am not enough of a Star Wars nerd to know that answer.
Well, sometimes, like, I mean, it's not that you're not enough of a Star Wars nerd. These fanfic authors will be including some deep cuts in their writing sometimes.
Yes.
That sometimes it's easy to miss, so I totally get it. But so as you were reading this, was there any parts of this where you're kind of going through and you're having any sort of emotional reactions to any of those choices that the characters made?
No, it was too quick for me to have much of an emotional reaction. It was kind of just a very short story that went all over the place, and I enjoyed it, but I didn't have any like deep connection to anyone, which is common for these smaller stories. How about you?
I would say my main one is I just really felt sorry for Obi-Wan because I as I was reading it, I mean, the author does a really good job of giving us examples of how these visions have put a burden on him. We see, I mean, he's waking up at night in the middle of the night, panicking because of a nightmare. He's trying everything possible within his power to try to avoid bad outcomes that he's seen and push towards good ones. And he's just trying to manage a lot. And this is all like on the shoulders of like a 16-year-old, which is
Yeah.
insane to think about. And then to on top of that, feel like he can't even tell anybody other than three other 16-year-olds. I mean, that's a lot. So that was my main thing as I was reading this, is I was just really feeling sorry for him of trying to figure all this out. So I felt like that was described and shown on the page really well by the author.
My favorite scene was this one scene that made me think Harry Potter, which is I love Harry Potter. Okay, so when Obi-Wan has woken up from after the mall fight, and the first words out of his mouth was the name of his best friend. It's this female what was she? Mon Calamari.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's like, Bant? And then his friends, what made it really was the friends on the side that were like, didn't see that coming, did you? And the author wrote that in such a way that you could just feel it. It was just like a cute, funny moment. But yeah, it reminded me of Harry Potter when, you know what scene I'm talking about? Where Ron wakes up in the hospital and like whispers Hermione's name.
Oh, okay. My Harry
girlfriend.
Potter knowledge is not the best, but okay, that sounds cute though.
It was adorable.
Yeah, I really appreciated the friendships in this, because even though Obi-Wan didn't have an adult that he could tell, he did have, I mean, his friends really had his back. I mean, they had like a comm link that they had like synced up to where he could call them at any time, or I don't know if it was a comm link, but it was like some kind of thing that would beep when it was like a pager.
Yeah, it was like a box, and he pushed the button and all of them lit up, and anybody who was in the temple would meet them in the secret room.
Yeah, like that was just cute because they really were supporting him. They were going above and beyond to support him. So that was nice. So yeah, that was a good scene. Just kind of seeing that relationship between the four of them.
Right. And had he not had that, his life would have been very different. And really, honestly, probably the entire Star Wars universe, if this was canon, would have been so different.
Yeah, because he would have had nobody. Like, there's even one part where one of them they like create a double-bladed lightsaber to help him train for his fight with Maul. And if he didn't have those friends, then he wouldn't have been able to do anything like that. He would have just been freaking out by himself with nobody to help him prepare for anything, or even anybody to just like bounce ideas off of. All of that would have just been non-existent. Well, okay, so my favorite scene was, we kind of mentioned this earlier, but when Obi-Wan was using reverse psychology on Qui-Gon to make sure that Anakin comes with them, that was so just ridiculous, because it's also just like kind of true. Like, in terms of the canon portrayal of these characters, like basically what happens is Obi-Wan, based on the outcomes that he has seen, he feels like it's kind of hard to explain without reading it, but based on all the outcomes that he's seen, he feels like Anakin joining the Order is like the best outcome out of the options that they have. And so he's like, okay, I need to do whatever I can to make sure that Anakin comes with us to Naboo and then goes with us from Naboo to the temple. And to make sure that this happens, he uses reverse psychology on Qui-Gon and is pretending that he doesn't want Anakin to come. And the reason he's doing this is because the way that the writing explains it is that he knows that Qui-Gon will just dig in his heels more if Obi-Wan's like, no, I don't want to do this. So he just like exaggerates how much he doesn't want Anakin to come. And then Qui-Gon's like, no, he's coming. Like, stop arguing. So I just thought that was funny because I could totally see that.
Yes, absolutely. So Is that is the scene though? Is that what the author was trying to fix in the Phantom Menace? Like, why did tiny Anakin come with them to there?
Or maybe why did Obi-Wan not want Anakin to come? Like,
Yeah.
I could see it being something like that because in the movie, I think in the novel, if I remember correctly, in the novelization, I think we do get a little bit more explanation. But in the movie, Obi-Wan's just like, why does this guy gotta come with us? You kind of don't really know why he's saying that, other than the fact that Anakin's a kid, and it seems like Qui-Gon tends to, form relationships with people at really inconvenient times a lot. And so, other than that, though, I don't think we ever get a super detailed explanation. So that was what I thought that maybe the author was referring to when they said that they kind of wanted to address something from the movie.
Okay, so at the very end, they are talking. Qui-Gon makes this comment about how the three Padawans that came randomly, which Obi-Wan did not know was happening, but his friend showed up right after the main battle or during the main battle. That where normally Qui-Gon would die, and then but Obi-Wan fixed it by, I think it said very briefly that I think he put up one of the shields or something and prevented something, and that's how Qui-Gon didn't die. But his friends all showed up, and then Bant went and healed him, which is why Obi-Wan then lives. But Qui-Gon ends up saying that Windu will only give the Padawans a light sentence, basically. They're not going to really be in trouble, but they abandoned their posts, left their masters without telling anybody, flew across the world or wherever, and just jumped into a battle they weren't supposed to be in, that nobody knew that Qui-Gon was going to die in. So there's no reason for them to do that. Why are they only getting a light sentence? I'd be pissed.
I could see, if it was up to Mace Windu, I could see the light sentence not being a thing.
No.
I believe that if it was in Qui-Gon's power, I believe that Qui-Gon would have given them a light sentence. Because Qui-Gon, I just feel like Qui-Gon, he kind of just, accepts people's explanations. And I mean that in a good way. He trusts people's explanations, and he trusts people's intentions a lot more. So I could see Qui-Gon giving them a light sentence. But Mace Windu, if Mace Windu was responsible for that, I don't think that would have been the case.
No. No, definitely not.
Yeah.
Yoda was there too, though. Maybe Yoda put his foot down. And it was like, oh, these kids, they know what they're doing.
See, Yoda, I could see Yoda going either way in terms of light sentence versus harsh sentence. I think it depends on what kind of day Yoda's having, because I really could see it going either way. Okay, I have a question for you now.
Okay, I'm ready.
So in canon, I guess speaking of Jedi Masters and their stances on things, in canon, do you think that they actually would have taken Obi-Wan's visions seriously? Any of them?
Qui-Gon, maybe. Everyone else? I don't think so. Because, look at how they reacted to... Well, they reacted to Anakin the way they do, but partially probably because Anakin is a bit all over the place. And they can't really trust him to not be emotional first. But I think they would have believed Obi-Wan over Anakin on this type of thing.
True. Obi-Wan is a lot more... what's the word I'm looking for? You can trust him a lot more than you can trust Anakin.
Level-headed.
Yeah,
logical.
level-headed. Yeah, he's just easier to take his word for things than Anakin is. Yeah, I guess as I was reading this, I was kind of going back and forth, because I agree with you that I think Qui-Gon would have at least been like, okay, let's look into this. I don't know if canon Qui-Gon would have totally accepted it, but thinking about canon Qui-Gon's background, and I know that canon Qui-Gon was really interested in the prophecy of the Chosen One and all that type of stuff. I think that means that he would lean a little bit more towards taking it more seriously than the others. But one thing that I've been coming across in canon recently, I think because I was reading the Yoda comic that dropped not too long ago, is there's a question that comes up of how seriously should Force visions be taken? Because if you misinterpret it, it can just cause a whole bunch of other problems. So it's kind of like, and in some cases, maybe even become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So
Right.
that's, I think, why Yoda was kind of like, in canon, we see him a lot more hesitant about Force visions, but Qui-Gon, I think, at least would have been more willing to listen to Obi-Wan and kind of see what the options were.
Yeah, I think you're right, especially with what you said about how he cared a lot about the chosen one prophecy. Like that would have confirmed what he knew about it or thought about it and would have tried to help Obi-Wan to achieve the outcome he was looking for.
Yeah. And the fact that he's interested in a prophecy, to me, that kind of means like, okay, he's already a little woo-woo. He's into the woo-woo stuff a little. So to me, he's a lot more likely to take a vision seriously than someone else who's a lot more strictly logical or rational would. Okay, I have another question for you. So, okay, going back to how Obi-Wan could see multiple outcomes of the same issue and like kind of different options for how they were going to go down. I got the impression that when he saw the vision of the temple burning, there were multiple ways that he saw that that could happen. And it sounded like there were other ways that that could happen that might not have even involved Anakin. Did you get that same impression?
Yeah, somewhere in the story it was talking about how if Anakin did not come with, the Jedi Order would fall like right away. But if he did come with, they had an extra 13 years before the temple burned and they could figure it out.
Okay, yes. Okay, yes. Now I remember. So, okay, going from there, if it wasn't Anakin, do you have any other theories for what could have made it fall if Anakin wasn't even involved?
Probably just the Jedi themselves, just getting in their own way.
Yeah. Or maybe Sidious would have just got someone else.
Yeah.
Maybe some Inquisitor or something would have, instead of being chosen to be an Inquisitor, they would have been chosen as his other apprentice.
That's a good question. I hadn't really thought about that at all.
Or, like you said, maybe even the Jedi themselves. Maybe Sidious wouldn't have even had to do anything. Because, I mean, the cracks were certainly there, regardless.
Right. The cracks were there well before Anakin showed up. What are we reading next month?
Next month, we are reading You Shall Become Me by Jedi Patty. And this is another canon divergent one, where in this one, it's also prequel era. In this one, quick little one-line summary of it is the rules in this alternate universe are if you kill a Sith Lord, then you become a Sith Lord. Like, you kind of assume their place. And so since Obi-Wan killed a Sith Lord on Naboo, he's kind of got a little bit of an issue that he has to deal with now. So,
oh, that's different.
Yeah. I thought that sounded interesting.
Yeah.
So we will post that in the show notes and video description and all that. And also, we do have a YouTube channel. Speaking of video description, we have a YouTube channel. So if you like to watch while you listen, check us out on YouTube. It's just called One Hell of a Fanfic. And then we also are on Instagram, which is One Hell of a Fanfic with a period in between every word. And on Instagram, that's where we're posting upcoming episodes, what we're going to be reading next, all that good stuff.
Sometimes funny memes.
Occasionally a funny meme.
To make them.
Yeah, I need to get back on the meme train, but
we'll get there.
We've got a nice little backlog of memes on there. Well, we will catch y'all next month, and thanks for joining us. Bye, y'all. Thanks so much for joining us at One Hell of a Fanfic. On this podcast, we discuss Star Wars fan fiction, but we do not own the rights to Star Wars or any of the written works we cover. We have no affiliation with Lucasfilm or the fanfic authors we credit for their work. For questions, please email us at onehellofafanfic@gmail.com.